Ready?
Of
No!
course not.
Ah! We did it again. Maya Matsuoka. Walking backwards. Tim Langley. Splashing overboard. Here we go. Hosted by Maya Matsuoka.
Good morning. Good morning, Timothy. Welcome once again to, Japanese Politics One-on-One. It's actually your show. So I'm very, very appreciative of the fact that you are once again here, this time reporting from Misaki. And thank you to everybody who joined us just now or who is going to join us in the next couple of hours or next week. It's a pleasure to have you with us on Japanese Politics One-on-One once again, where Timothy Langley tells us what happened in Japanese politics and in Japan, and also the Japanese economy to a certain extent, during the past week, with me as a host, Maya Matsuoka. Timothy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maya, and good morning, everybody. Today is April 19th, 271 episodes, Maya. And, I really have to tell people how much I appreciate Japanese politics is not everybody's cup of tea. Yet you join us, not everybody joins us every Sunday, but there is a good core group of people that join us. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Japanese politics is what I do for a living. People pay me money to do things with them and for them that involve some component of Japanese politics. And I appreciate that it's a little bit dense, that maybe sometimes things don't move so quickly. And what does it mean to me? So I really appreciate that you've tuned in. And I try and give this briefing as robustly and as informatively as I can so that it's interesting and impactful to you. So with that said, let me get on to it now. Next week starts Golden Week. So we are moving up very quickly, Maya. We've got this whole work week in front of us. Then Monday, Tuesday, then Wednesday's a national holiday. I think it's Showa Day. And then Thursday and Friday are work days. And then we move into Golden Week proper. But there's a lot going on leading up to Golden Week. Golden Week is kind of almost not quite a 2-week shutdown of the country and of the economy. The prime minister will actually leave for Australia. She'll be there for 3 days. And a lot of other things that are going on too. This time last week, the LDP had its national convention, its annual national convention. It's actually its birthday day for the LDP. They hold this every year. This year, under the leadership of Timothy Takaichi, she actually came out and said, constitutional revision is something that I want to address this year. That means within the year that we're in, 2027 right now. This is something that is important to me and I want to address it. And she outlined a couple of the components that would potentially be included in constitutional revision, among other things, some other things that she wants to achieve in this next year. One of them being the LDP needs to secure more seats in the upper house in the next election. That's 2.5 years away. So she's forward planning for that. We need to get the candidates. We need to get the issues. We need to get our manifesto together. So she's already forward planning that, stinging from this rebuke of the national budget, which wasn't passed on time, 7 days late, just this last week. So she's stinging from that. She did suffer a little bit of bruises to her personality, but her personality profile and her appreciation among the population is very high. So there was a lot of other things going on. 30 ambassadors from the NATO countries visited Japan this week. 30 of them, 30 ambassadors. There weren't flags flying as what happens with the delegation of a head of state. There was one head of state that visited this week. I'll get into that. But 30 ambassadors from NATO nations coming specifically to talk about Japan's military industrial complex and what they're building and how they can get a piece of that action. So that's rather significant. And rather quietly, but Koizumi has been really playing a central role here. Japanese defense ministry and the industrial complex that goes along with that has really begun to take a little bit more of a wind here. That's why the constitutional revision issue has come up again. So it's something that that we need to be prepared for. And although it's happening quietly, I think it's worth mentioning here. And also the finance ministry, there was the G7 meeting in Washington, D.C. last week. Japan's finance minister, Katayama, was there and made a couple of comments about a potential intervention into the yen market. The yen today was at 148.65, so a little bit stronger than it's been these last couple of weeks. And it is like a temperature read. Every week we talk about the yen. It's like, you know, putting a temperature read and seeing what's going on. It's a little bit stronger than it was last week. The news has been a little bit more hopeful. The Strait of Hormuz has opened up. It looks like the tensions between Israel and Lebanon are easing up. There was something of a ceasefire agreed to. So these things do have an impact, and they're represented in how Japanese politics moves forward and what pronouncements we get out of individuals that are there. So the self-defense forces will participate in a very robust military exercise in the Philippines. Last week I reported on it. The information that I had last week was that the self-defense forces would send a contingent of maybe 460 individuals to participate. In the past, they were observer status. The updated information I have now, and the exercises start next week and they go until May 2. So a 3-week exercise. And there are 1,400 STF officers that are going, or personnel, battleships, surface to air, surface to ship, the whole panoply of forces going in with the Philippines, with the United States, with Australia, a whole exercise that's going on there. It's a big deal. And it's not something that's happened in the past. So it is something that we should keep our eye on. So some of it is politics, some of it is economy, some of it is what's just going on with the prime minister. I'll try and unpack that. And if you can just give me 30 minutes of your time, we can get through that and then have a really insightful and hopefully influential to you Q&A session afterwards. So let me turn it back over to you, Maya, and then we can get into it.
Okay, thank you for this. And yes, to everybody who joined us now, thank you for doing that. Good morning as well. And yes, Rick, thank you very much for the correction. The yen is 158.61 actually. Yes. So yeah, 10 yen difference, but it is 158.61. So that was Friday night, and it is going to probably, well, we're going to see, of course, more fluctuations on the way forward. And I have to apologize about the movie night because I know. Yes, I very, very optimistically thought that, well, on the 28th this month, everybody would be able or would be happy to come. But it seems that 28th is in the beginning of the Golden Week. And so since the week before that, we already have engagements. Well, this month we are going to skip the movie night and aim at May. So apologies for this. Once again, please forgive me for being so lighthearted when it comes to movie nights. But yes, I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in May. And yes, Timothy, once again, everybody knows that there is a synopsis that goes out a couple of days after these briefings, each briefing, and now it is available on Substack, also on LinkedIn, and also on the website of Langley Esquire. Timothy, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Rick, for the correction. Of course, it's 158. It's not 148. The critical number here is 160. And as soon as it eclipses 160, I apologize for saying 148, it's 158. And we've been dancing towards that barrier for the last 6 weeks. And it's a very tense time, because when the yen eclipses 160, all sorts of things begin to happen within the ministries, within the prime minister's office, within the financial markets. And the fact that it went to 158 and a little bit, it's actually been dancing around the 158, 159 region this last week, but not as volatile as it was in the weeks past. So things are beginning to settle down, but it remains a real barometer of the stress within the system. The yen has strengthened somewhat this week, but you know, it's inescapable that Japan needs to import almost all of its energy needs, and that payment must be in dollars. So there's the 160 level is very important, because if they're paying in dollars, the number of yen that it takes to pay that every month is not going away. So the pressure that Japan faces, it's systemic. And so the Bank of Japan and the Finance Ministry are both doing their own thing. The Finance Ministry operates on a different kind of agenda, different kind of system. And the Bank of Japan is supposed to be independent. The president, Mr. Ueda, is appointed by the prime minister. Mr. Ueda was, I believe, appointed by, he might have been appointed by Ishiba, but I think he's been in office a little bit longer than that. 5-year terms. And he's on a different path, talking about bond yields and the GDP, that sort of thing. And the Finance Ministry is supposed to figure out how to distribute the money, how to collect taxes, how to, given that the price of the yen is at a certain level, what it should do policy-wise. But there's a divergence between policy right now and the market. So the Bank of Japan policy rate remains around 0.75%, but the 10-year government bond yield is now sitting around 2.4%. And that gap tells you something important. The market is already tight for balancing the expectations of the market and the true value. So when the bond yield in a 10-year is paying far more than what the bond yield is paying today, it tells you there's an imbalance there, and it needs to be addressed. The Bank of Japan will have their monthly meeting on the 28th. That's next Tuesday. This is important because the Bank of Japan will have its meeting, and then we kind of move into Golden Week. The Prime Minister also said a couple of weeks ago, I don't want to do anything that's going to upset the market until after we come back from Golden Week. I don't want the population to be upset with that, and let's see how things go with Hormuz and with the oil. So the inflection point here seems to be Golden Week. The Prime Minister won't be in country. She'll be in Australia. I think she might hit another country after that. I don't have the full agenda with me. But going to Australia is a big deal, but being out of the country is also a big deal. The Bank of Japan will have their meeting on Tuesday, and it's pregnant with meaning and impact. So it's something you should keep your eye on and watch it. In the meantime, the Finance Minister, Satsuki Katayama, was in Washington, D.C. for the G7 last week. This was not just G7, all of the finance ministers within the G7 talking about stability and currency fluctuations and things like that. But it was particularly for the finance minister to actually signal intervention into the market. Can you turn your mic off, please, Maya? I can hear you.
Sure.
Whacking your cat. The intervention in the market, if the yen goes past, and it feels like this is telegraphing that she does expect, or she does anticipate, and she's getting the buy-in from the United States and other countries. That's actually what is required before they intervene. And it just has that bit of a smell to it. So there's a lot going on. Like I said, it's an inflection point right now. These next 2 weeks will be critically important. I don't know if the yen will stabilize. It has for these last maybe 2 weeks, but indeed something is going to happen in the next couple of weeks, I sense, because it could stabilize and then markedly find its groove, or it could change, and everything depends on actually what else is going on throughout the world. Let me get to the Prime Minister, who has actually remained popular in spite of some of the things that are going on. I think she's doing a really great job. She is a workaholic, and I think she kind of pushes the members of her cabinet and her staff and other members of the LDP kind of beyond what they're accustomed to. She's active, she's engaged, and she works really hard, but it does create a little bit of a rift within other parts of the LDP. So one of the people that is not a favorite of hers, a member of the LDP, is in the upper house. He has formed another preliminary faction. He's not calling it a faction. He went out of his way when the 40 members gathered over lunch, I think on Wednesday of last week, to say, this isn't a faction. We're just getting together because we like each other and we want to schmooze and talk about what's going on in Japanese politics. But he is kind of a thorn in her side. He should have really pulled together the upper house during the budget committee, but he's got a bit of a bone to pick with her. They don't get along. They haven't gone along for a long time. He was also a protege of Shinzo Abe when he was prime minister, even before he was prime minister. So they're very tight. And here she comes in. He was actually in the Abe faction. She never was. And, you know, who in the hell are you? And how come he's having favor on you and you're not even a member of the faction? And I've been, you know, supporting him for years. And so there's a little bit of a personality rip there. I don't want to overplay it, but the fact that he has also come in, this is the second initiative, maybe the third, for building a foundation, a social foundation, connection, not quite a faction. They're not calling it a faction, but I think in Japanese politics and in politics elsewhere, I think factions play a useful role. And in fact, they were a defining role in Japanese politics up until the prime minister decided that factions are the bane of all things that are evil in Japanese politics, and they weren't banned, but they were all closed down. The only one that remained and didn't close down was Mr. Taro Aso's faction, which is still in existence. But I think you're going to see a slow emergence here, and part of that is triggered because it's not that she is aloof, but she prefers, I think, reading briefs and dealing with paper and documents rather than sitting in a smoke-filled room and talking to people and having drinks and chatting about things. She's not quite that kind of a politician. She does smoke. She keeps it very quiet and private. But you know, as we know, she lives in the Kante, 20 yards from where the Kante is the residence of the prime minister. The prime minister can choose to live there or not. She has chosen to live there, and she lives there with her husband, who requires a lot of attention since he's semi-bedridden. He is also a former Japanese politician. So that occupies some of her time too. But once again, famously, she gets up at 3 o'clock. She can't sleep, and she gets to work right away. So there's a layer of politics that's going on here that does rub some people wrong. It's not like it was. And also, just as a slight divergence, I know a lot of people here are deep in Japanese politics. In 1976, at this time of the year, Kakue Tanaka was suffering from the Lockheed scandal. There was the Senator Frank Church hearings in Washington, D.C., where he was wagging a finger at the intelligence community saying, are you bribing certain countries to make deals go forward? And I want you to, you are under oath and you're supposed to tell me this. And because of the Frank Church hearings, a lot of things came out, and it was revealed, yes, we do make payments. We do certify payments. They're not bribes, and they are, in fact, bribes. And it came out, a lot of things came out. One of the things impactful to Japan was Kakue Tanaka did receive a 500 million through Marubeni for a deal where Japan, I think it was Japan Airlines, bought Lockheed airplanes. And that really tempered Japanese politics. It tempered what lobbyists do, because the lobbyists were portrayed as the middlemen here. And so it really colored a lot of what afterwards became of Japanese politics. It also revealed many of the assets that the CIA had in the community here. Name the names. Who are the guys that are digging up secrets and they're hiding behind their professional profile in Bain and Company or something else? They're not with the embassy. We want their names, and a lot of people were flushed out there. So it really changed Japanese politics. Things are quite a bit different here, but the LDP remains in a state of constant change, and it wants to move forward on those things that it was created to do. And one of those was to revise the Constitution. That's one of the foundation arguments there. So when Ms. Takaichi was talking last week at the National Convention, she did say, this year I want to address the revision of the Constitution. And there were 2 or 3 things that she specifically said. And you have to pay attention. One of them was, of course, the self-defense forces. We want the self-defense forces to be acknowledged as a military unit within the Japanese context. It's not kind of a self-defense forces. It's restricted in what it can do. We want it to be a little bit more robust. But she also said that the position of members of the parliament would be untouched in the event of some event, controversy, conflict, where there might be otherwise an election. Without the election, then the parliamentarians would stay put. And this is important because what this does is it brings the other parliamentarians in, even the opposition parties, to protect their own interests. She's protecting our interests. She's saying, let's revise the Constitution. You get something out of this too, but we want to do this too. So the reason why that's important is because to change the Constitution requires 2/3 vote in the upper house, 2/3 vote in the lower house, and then what was passed, the language of the constitutional revision, is promoted to the public, and they have a referendum, so people get to vote. And of the people who decide to vote, as long as it's more than 50%, a little bit more than 50%, then that referendum passes. So they might have 2 or 3 language recommendations. 2 of them pass and 1 of them doesn't. But that's how the process works. And that can happen pretty quickly. They are considering right now the intelligence security legislation, which was talked about roundly last year, a little bit more enthusiastically towards the end of the year, and they put it on the legislative timetable for this diet session. We just passed the budget, and now the legislation is moving forward. It looks like this legislation is going to move through on greased skids. It will become the law this session, as she kind of demanded it to be done, but it is moving very quickly. And when you see legislation like that, it's not constitutional revision, but it is very key, important piece of legislation to move through so lickety-split. It does make you wonder if there was some sort of a critical event, some act event for constitutional revision, it could happen very, very quickly. And for her to say, at the National Convention, let's change the Constitution, I think it's something that we should keep our eye on. So I'll continue to report on that. But the arithmetic of getting that done means the upper house and the lower house, it's not just the LDP, it's not just Ishin, you need to get other people involved in it, people who really are not on your side. So you're going to be seeing more and more movement in that direction. Ideology, Sanseito, the Democratic Party for the People, and this kind of weird amalgamation for the Centrist Reform Alliance. It's having a real soul-searching difficulty right now. The party it's fractured. It actually consists of 3 separate parts. It consists of the Centrist Alliance in the lower house, which is the upper house, the lower house, which is Komeito and the constitutional Democratic Party, the remains of that. And then it's got the, in the upper house, it's got still the remnants of Komeito and the Constitutional Democratic Party. So they're supposed to be together as one party, therefore they have power, they have influence, they have weight, but they still can't get their act together. And of course, the former leader of the Constitutional Democratic Party resigned as a consequence of that failure and the fact that they didn't do very well in the last election. But even now they're having difficulty. So the LDP it's not in any sort of a crisis mode. It's strong in the lower house. It's kicking itself because it's lacking those 4 critical votes in the upper house, but it did get them. It got them to pass the budget, but we don't know how long that, how sticky that that alliance is with those four members. And in any event, even if it was strong, the distribution in the upper house is very weak and temperamental. So something needs to be happening with that. Thus, the prime minister mentioned it in the convention. So with regard to diplomacy, these last 2 weeks have been unusually dense. You don't hear a lot about it in the press. We did have the Indonesian president. We had France Macron visit last week or 2 weeks ago. But this week, Poland's premier visited. He was here for 3 days. And there was a lot of diplomacy going on there. Apparently, Poland and Japan, they both possess kind of a similar situation. Poland in the EU and Japan in Southeast Asia, both of them kind of playing under other domineering roles, but they need to act, consistently and effectively with their neighbors in order to project and to protect themselves. But I think the more striking thing that happened this last week was this 30 ambassadors from the NATO countries visiting Japan. This has never happened before. 30 of them. They did consider having a NATO office. You remember maybe this time last year or 2 years ago, NATO is thinking of having an office in Tokyo. That idea has not really matured, but NATO is keenly interested in Japan and what Japan is doing. So 30 of these ambassadors came in this last week, mostly spending it with Koizumi, the defense minister, but they went to Yokosuka. They visited manufacturing companies for military armaments and that sort of thing. So it wasn't quite diplomacy as you might expect ambassadors to be involved in. It was mostly about the military industrial complex. So that tells you that while other people are looking at other things, this industry is taking off in spite of the restrictions of the Japanese constitution that you will have no offensive weaponry. You won't trade it. You won't be purchasing it. You won't be holding it. You have defensive means only. Japan has a peace constitution. So that, I think that the reality here we have to acknowledge is that is in the past, and thus the constitution basically needs to change to kind of accommodate the reality. So this visit was not ceremonial. It was actually a working level, and it's a greater part of the defense industrial ecosystem that is in Japan, and it's becoming more robust. It's becoming more mechanical, if I can say that. And I mentioned about the exercises in the Philippines. It's a massive exercise that's going on starting next week. But 1,400 SDF officers, ships, and exercises for anti-ship, for drones, that sort of thing. It's going to go on for about 3 weeks. That's pretty important. And so these things incrementally, they tell you that things are changing in a very quick way. And although they might not seem completely integrated, they all have a meaning together. And it's not moving fast, but it is moving quietly forward, and it's something that you need to keep an eye on. Let's see what else we've got going on. Energy and geopolitics. Japan has authorized a $10 billion yen, that's about $650 million of a subsidy for oil for Southeast Asian nations. This is a big deal. I mean, you would think Japan is suffering from having to import the oil itself. It has to pay in US dollars for that. And now it's come up and said, $6.5 million we will be contributing to our nations. That's Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, and Singapore. Japan is developing this kind of, well, it's diplomacy in action, actually. They would probably call it checkbook diplomacy, because it's not really shipping oil. Japan doesn't have the oil. But for oil needs, it is supplying that kind of checkbook diplomacy to its neighbors to help coalesce that unified source in the event that there might be something happening in the Taiwan Strait. So this is all preparation for that. the Philippines exercise, the 30 NATO ambassadors coming in, the fact that the Prime Minister is visiting Australia at the end of this month, it all is going to, creating this regional stability, and it's really it's not quite on steroids, but it's moving very quickly. So let me see what else is moving on that is important. I think what we're observing here is a convergence of a lot of different things. I know that perhaps the talking points seem somewhat jumbled, but I'm trying to pull together a lot of things that are happening that pull into a point of where Japanese politics, where Japan stands regionally and geopolitically. And there's a lot going on that tells you it's different than it was when Kakue Tanaka was prime minister, and that was in 1976. He actually had to resign as a consequence of that. We don't have anything like that going on here, not under this administration. I think the Prime Minister, Ms. Takaichi, is clean. She's devout. She's a patriot, and she wants to recreate Japan so that it can stand alone. It doesn't need to bow to the United States or to China or anything like that. And in fact, amazingly enough, the relations between Korea and Japan have always been very tenuous and very tense. But an opinion poll just recently produced the result that Sanai Takaichi is the most admired person of all politicians, of all Japanese prime ministers that Japan has had in recent history. And this is a huge deal. This is a huge deal for the current president of South Korea, who is not normally such a Japan fan. He actually comes from the opposition party, but strides are being made there, and it is having an impact. It's having an impact not just in trade and other relations, but this bonding that is so important to the United States. Japan, the United States, and South Korea, they need to have this affinity that China really would rather not allow to happen. China is still South Korea's largest trading partner, as it is Japan's, even though there are tensions, there are problems there. But there's still a lot of flux that's going on there. And I can see that with the Strait of Hormuz and the oil that's being restricted there, China needs to really kind of tone down if they want their economy to continue going forward, if the United States has got its finger on that valve of how much oil is coming and going. So really, geopolitically, not just in Japan, we are in a real state of flux, and I think a lot will be turned out in the next couple of weeks. In fact, you're going to see a set change there. It's something that I'm keenly observing, and I appreciate you, being attentive and following this, and then coming up with great observations and questions too, as we roll into the Q&A period. So I'd like to wrap that up now. Sorry for going a little bit long and a little bit winded on some of the points, but thank you very much for joining us every week, and I hope this is a source of good information and insight to you. Maya? I love it when you leave your mic off.
Right, I was going to speak without unmuting myself. All right, so thank you, Timothy. And moving on to the Q&A session. Before we do that, again, I would like to invite you to subscribe for the newsletter of Langley Esquire and follow the briefings there as well. Also, the
company... Can I say something about that, Maya?
Yes, please do.
The newsletter. So the readership of the newsletter is really increasing, and it's also published on Substack. And I don't know why. I think it's a feature that when you sign up for Substack, you're supposed to say, or you're supposed to have a dialogue box. I contribute or I pay to the author for this information, and you're supposed to sign it. You're supposed to pledge, even though we don't have it turned on. So we're not triggering where people have pledged. But it's a funny thing, and I hope people understand that we're not asking you to pay for it, but Substack, I think it requires you to go in and pledge something, right? Before they allow you to be a member?
Yes, I think it does. It doesn't do it every time. And of course, you're very free to say no, thank you. And in any event, even if you pledge, we're not going to charge.
That's
That's,
right. Just send me
yes.
cash instead.
All right. Okay. Anyway, so the newsletter is also available on LinkedIn from last week. Actually, we're back on LinkedIn because LinkedIn now allows us to publish newsletters there as well. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that at the platform which you enjoy the most. And of course, you can always find the newsletter on the website of Langley Esquire as well. If you have been with us, let us know that you have by hitting like or follow or subscribe. Also by commenting, because as Timothy says, the second parts of these briefings are always very enjoyable, and I think that they also provide a lot of insights thanks to the comments and questions that you share with us. So let's move, and the first questions, it's not just one question. We know where they
Oh
come
boy.
from. Right, yes. Okay, just they're so far down. Yes, they come from Washington, I think Washington DC. Oh, okay.
Go,
Here.
Maya, go. Go, Maya,
Yes,
go.
yes. All right, here we go. Yes, we've got the first question from Byron. It comes with a comment as well. An international peace mediation unit is being established featuring the LDP, Ishin, and the Democratic Party for the People to complement the bureaucratic equivalent unit established at MOFA in March. How might such entities function together? Might the Prime Minister see a role for herself in peacemaking? Presumably, even with Japan's peace constitution, it can participate in military mechanisms such as military armistice commission, the joint body established in 1953 to supervise the Korean War armistice agreement. Appreciate your thoughts on this, Timothy. So,
Thank you, Byron. I'm not up to speed on that. This new committee, I'm hearing it for the first time from you. I'm wondering what kind of conflict they intend to address, or maybe it's a standard procedure for dealing with peace opportunities that Japan can, wave the flag at. I'm not sure about that, but frequently Japan, or maybe the prime minister's office, will set up committees or offices to structurally engage with opposition to strengthen that relationship, so that when a vote comes, we're working together, we have other things, and you're invested in that. So please give us a little bit of flexibility when this new vote comes up. It could be something like that. I don't know, but like I said, I'm not aware of the initiative, so maybe I should look into it a little bit more.
right. Okay. And yes, we can look into that a little bit more. And now going to the first questions that came after Byron's, we've got Aloha Apostle. So thank you very much for being here from the very beginning, even before we started the live stream today. So he says, oh, it's something a little bit more pleasant, away from politics, I believe, but please allow us to do this. So, talking to my friend in Japan, she was hearing that a few, oh no, this is not the one, the pleasant one, sorry. Okay, this is the serious one. Talking to my friend in Japan, she was hearing that a few crises could lead to COVID year limitations. Is there any talk in the diet of these extreme measures at the moment?
I don't know. I have not heard any news of like a bird flu or any sort of epidemic, something like that. I mean, the biggest,
No,
scariest thing
similar.
I've heard.
Similar measures to the COVID because of the fuel crisis now, the oil crisis. Do you
Okay.
think that there will be, yes, or have there been any
Yes.
deliberations about imposing COVID-like
Now I
restrictions?
understand the question. Thank you very much. This question was also put to the prime minister, and she punted. She pushed it away. And as I said earlier in my talking points, um, she doesn't want to really address things until after Golden Week. She doesn't want to shock the system. She doesn't want to. She wants, the situation in the United States and Iran to hopefully be settled so that she doesn't have to address that. But yes, they have a certain limited amount of oil in reserves. She's announced that she's releasing another 20 billion barrels in May. And when she was pressed on it, do we need to start being more conservative, and do we need to have restrictions in place? She was asked that, and in fact, that was part of the poll, and the Japanese people actually are for that. They're saying, we should impose these restrictions so that we can make the most of what we do have. And she's being a little bit more sanguine about it, and she's saying, well, let's just wait and see how things go. Let's address that maybe after Golden Week. So there is some concern going on about that, but at the political level, nothing has been public.
Right. I also hear on the news that, the announcers and also some politicians, they're trying to reassure the public that, they don't have to rush to the drugstore and buy toilet paper, for example, to stop. No, it's true. I mean, the other day it was on the morning news, right? One of the emissions there. So it's interesting how they're trying to really not panic or how can I say, not disturb the peace once again, as you said, not at least before the Golden Week. But yes, there is a lot of care about that here. So, and then the next question is about kawaii culture, Timothy. So once again from Aloha Apostle. So he says, Japan often leads on kawaii cultural trends. Is there a way that the Japanese government can take advantage of this new puffy sticker mania happening in Japan before it goes global? What is the puffy sticker mania? I don't know, but if it is about kawaii culture, I think that they have been working on this for quite a while. When you think about when you think about Hello Kitty, for example, well, that kawaii-sa, right? It has been exported so very aggressively that basically, I mean, you have the brand, which is also maybe as strong as it is in Japan. It is as strong overseas as it is in Japan. But Timothy, if you have something else to add here, please.
No, I don't. I can only echo what you said. I mean, this is old hat. Japan is, especially the 20s, the teens and the 20s, sometimes up into the 30s. Kawaii culture, it's such an embedded part of Japanese culture. If you go to Harajuku, that's all it is. Harajuku is the fountain of youth for kawaii culture. So, and it's, I mean, for all the foreigners that come to Japan, I think all of them have on their to-do list Shibuya Crossing and Harajuku, at least. Maybe Ginza, but I think at least Shibuya Crossing everybody wants to see, and Harajuku, because it is the center of the kawaii culture. But I think this has been going on for a long time. They had Cool Japan for a while. That was a pretty magnificent flop, but kawaii has really outlived that. And I think the Japanese really do a good job on it, not just in fashion, but also in anime and in just fashion trends. But I don't have much more to add on that, so I apologize.
Right, and I still think that Cool Japan, the headquarters, is still in operation, but I may be mistaken. So if somebody has more information about this, let us know. And we're moving on to more serious questions now. Again, Rick says Japan might be wise to build up some military defenses, since America's politics suggest we might not always be in that tight alliance. If America quits Japan, it's not like Japan cannot defend itself. It's that Japan would have to defend itself alone. Right.
So the Japanese government, the Ministry of Defense, set up a new office for drones. This is a new office just for drones. So I think, if you leave it to the Japanese, they're going to come up with a clever solution to a problem they have. The problem they have is there are not many kids who want to join the self-defense forces. And even if the self-defense forces was a little bit more attractive. They gave them more money, or the Constitution actually acknowledged them. They got respect from, parents and people in society for joining, for being a patriot, for doing push-ups, for doing that sort of thing. Maybe that would change. But the reality is that there aren't that many kids that would do that. I mean, the industry and the economy requires them elsewhere, and so they're just not going to be able to come up with people to populate that. So what they've done is they've come up with unmanned drones run by AI, and so this office of drones just established this last week. Not huge. I think it's only got a staff cross responsibilities of maybe 20 people or so, but it is a start, and I think it is the wave of the Japanese defense future. They don't have that many people that are going to be, peppered on all the islands to prevent an invasion force, but they can have, world-class drones, surveillance, underwater drones, that sort of thing. And if they're good, and I think the NATO ambassadors have all identified the potential of Japanese being good at this, then they can export them elsewhere in the world, and then it can finally get its economy back on track because people will buy military hardware rather than automobiles.
Right. To this point, Hiroko-san says, "Good morning, everyone. Nissan Motor Corporation has developed a technology in collaboration with parts manufacturers that significantly reduces its reliance on rare earth elements. The company cut the amount used by 90% compared with previous models, and other companies are trying to cut down the use of rare earth, and I believe it is a good sign." Thank you very much for this information, Hiroko-san. Yes, and Manabe-san, again to this point, says, Australia and Indonesia will be next key partner countries about when it comes to diplomacy and defense.
Yeah. We also see, this movement away from the rare earths when you can have a substitute there, also with plastics. So with the oil embargo and the lack of guaranteed supply, they are coming up with different ideas on plastics, and Japan is just awash with plastics. But some of them are really essential for use, for example, surgical gloves and for packing and things like that. But they are going through a soul-searching effort there too, and I think they will come out of this a little bit more better prepared, and maybe the supply chain's a little bit more better established and not reliant on petroleum products.
Right. Yes. Thank you for that. And we've got here a question from Corey Jones. He says, would it be reasonable for Prime Minister Takaichi to currently see any realistic opening to advance Japan's reclaim on the northern territories and move toward a peace treaty with Russia?
Wouldn't that be magnificent? And no, it doesn't look to be in the cards. She hasn't developed that relationship yet. Shinzo Abe did. He worked really hard to work on that. And in fact, it's not even much in the public eye. People aren't clamoring for the return of the Northern Islands. You do see the trucks every once in a while. They protest in front of the Russian embassy, but they're not as vociferous as they once were. So even in the public eye, it's I think it's not hot on the list. And maybe since it's been this way, it's just a quiet kind of acknowledgement that it's a bridge a little bit too far. We don't have the relationship with Russia. Russia also feels like they deserve it for the number of people that were killed in the war. That's their land. It used to be their land. They had people there too. And what the hell? Why do the Japanese feel like they have a superior claim on it? So I think that one is just, it's probably just going to lay there for a while. But as a consequence, as you pointed out, Japan and Russia don't have a peace treaty signed. And that's an astounding fact.
Yes, indeed. And also what probably few people realize is that the Russian, it started basically this process of repopulating the northern islands with Russian people, basically military and their families first, but now there are also other people who have been settled there. It has been a very long process.
Yeah.
It started probably soon after the Second World War. So you have a Russian population there that basically is not going to be happy to give up those islands for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
And I also believe that the people in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs realize that as well. Because while I was working for one of the industry associations here, so basically we sent people there, but it was really difficult to send those
Yeah.
Japanese people who had ancestors buried on those islands. It was so difficult to get the permission for them to go there and pay their respect to the ancestors. It was possible.
Well, in fact, that was kind of like the qualification. You had to. Why do you want to come to these one of these 5 islands? Why? Well, my great grandfather farmed there, and his. Well, okay, you can go visit, but you have to be back in 3 days. Other
Yeah.
people, no, I want to go up. I want to take photographs of the bears, and I want to do some. Yeah, that one isn't going to fly.
Right. Yeah, so it's really something that probably is not going to happen at any time soon, if ever. I don't want to rain, on anybody's parade or thoughts or whatever, but yeah, the reality is what it is. And then
So
Peter,
can I just add something, just in
yes,
case there are Japan hands that are not quite familiar with it? Japan and Russia had a treaty of friendship and peace during World War II. And as soon as the Americans dropped the first atomic bomb, Russia informed Japan that it was breaking that treaty, and it immediately invaded Japan. So it had already invaded most of Manchuria. It was in of course, the eastern Russia, and their army invaded. They started with island hopping, and they got as far as, I think, Shikotan, which is the closest island to Hokkaido. And MacArthur told the Russians, we have more than 2 of these bombs. And if you step foot on Hokkaido, you're going to find out that, how devastating that's going to be. And that stopped it. So it's kind of like a dirty trick. The Japanese say, you played a dirty trick. We were friends. And then you waited for us to be on our back, and then you invaded. And what the hell, right? That's a little bit of the history that's there. I might have maybe miscolored it or colored it too much, but I think that's people need to understand that basic history.
well, I wouldn't say that Russia and Japan have been friends forever because there have been Japan-Russian wars, right?
Yes.
Wars. So, but anyway, we're going to talk about politics now. I'll continue talking
Okay.
about this. Yeah, and of course, Peter Pan says as long as President Putin is in power, the northern territories won't be returned to Japan. I think that it
Agreed.
doesn't depend on not only Putin, whoever comes after him. I believe that it's really going to be difficult to get those northern territories back. So,
Yeah.
yes. But yeah, at least until he's in power. But even after that, let's see what happens. All right, and of course, moving forward, we've got. Okay, so Hiroaki says Japan's participation in international maritime security operations in Hormuz. Are there any talks about this yet?
There has been a discussion. Mr. Kihara, the chief cabinet secretary, mentioned a discussion about helping police that without making any commitments. Things just take a long time in Japan, and particularly something at this level, it's an endless discussion. And the United States is basically saying, you should have been with us last Wednesday. Where the hell are you now? You want, now that the things are finished, you want to participate? Okay, well, we'll take that into consideration. So it might be just a little bit too late, but Japan does have a role to play. It's just getting the political will to participate. I mean, the prime minister, I guess she could do that and pull it off, but I think that there would be a political price to pay for it, and it might damage the desire for constitutional revision. So there are a lot of complications there, and I think she's treading this very carefully, very quietly. I think ultimately Japan will participate because it is a beneficiary of the straits being open and free and flowing trade coming out of there, not just the oil, but also the fertilizers. There are a lot of products that come out of the straits. But it's also a reflection on what could potentially happen with the Malacca Straits or the straits that feed into and out of Southeast Asia and the Sea of Japan region as well. So it's not quite a blueprint, but the Chinese are looking very carefully. How did the United States move on Iran and be so successful at it? And maybe this is a blueprint for us for Taiwan. So there's a lot going on, and I think the Prime Minister is treading that very, very carefully.
Yes, and we've got question from Hidefumi Doi-san. He says, recently General Assembly of LDP, the third SGT Tsugumi, was invited to sing the national anthem in uniform. This is really not appropriate because this event is not national event. In your Western point of view, what do you think about this?
Okay, so you're asking my opinion. I didn't see anything wrong with it. It is a ploy by Koizumi, though, and a clever one. He did have to have authorization to do that. But you see, as the military-industrial complex is beginning to emerge and people are beginning to notice it, also the importance and the attractiveness of the self-defense forces needs to be portrayed. It needs to be enhanced. The pay needs to be better. There needs to be better opportunities career-wise. And the general population needs to maybe not admire, but at least respect the people who are putting their lives on the line for the country. And that hasn't been a part of Japanese culture for 70 years. And with the gradual, diminishment of the United States, maybe physically, but also their intention to be there for Japan, to dominate, to be the nuclear umbrella, and to basically call the shots, that is going by the wayside, and Japan needs to come in and fill that gap. And I think, the LDP stands for that sort of a prognosis, that the self-defense forces does turn into an internationally respected and maybe even feared organization to defend Japan's interests.
Well, but once again, we come to the point, that if you are neutral, who is going to attack you, right? And then if you're not, then you really become a legitimate target. So going back, I just cannot help but say this, because once again, it is so very scary to me to think, Japan, because the Japanese people, they still respect those who sacrifice their lives. They have all those rituals, right, and traditions and this and that. So I think that basically, if you ask me as a Western woman, maybe, once again, I think that, moving towards militarization is really a dangerous step towards the future. But
can I comment on that, Maya?
Yes.
So yes, if you're a peaceful country, nobody should be attacking you. That might be the case, but we do have that incident where Japan had a peace and friendship agreement with Russia, and still Russia invaded. So, just because you have a peace constitution does not mean that somebody might not take advantage of it. You need to have teeth.
I think it's different.
Quite different, I agree.
It is different, yes, because you have a peace constitution, and that was, Japan was still in a state of war. Okay, so let's not mix these two things.
But people will say, yes, we're going to be friends. We have a friendship and commodity, and we are good buddies, and you run your country and we run our, there's an opportunity, And
no, we don't know that, but okay. We shouldn't turn this into such a deep discussion, but I will continue saying, these things. I cannot help myself, because I'm a woman, I'm a mother, and I want people to live peacefully together. And I believe that, yes, having a peaceful constitution is the first the first step towards that. Okay, so well, and it looks like we have been through most of the comments. Yuka, thank you very much for leaving the comment here. She says, great color on the 30 EU ambassadors evaluating Japanese defense ecosystem. All right. And yes, what else we've got? Yes, Rick, thank you very much for sharing your experience with the permanent residency, the system here. And I'm sorry that it didn't work out this time. Hopefully it will work out next time. I do wish you success there. And then, yes, what else? It looks like, yes, we have been through the questions and answers. All right, Timothy. Yes, you can go,
Thank you very much, Maya. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about Japanese politics and share some insights with you, and also, have this really great back and forth with all of you. I wish we had more opportunities. I wish we had maybe a face-to-face opportunity too. But this is as efficient as we can make it. So thank you
At the
very much
moment,
for joining
yes.
us on Sunday.
Who knows, a face-to-face opportunity might come along in the near future. All right. And again, to everybody who stayed with us, thank you very much. Again, please know that there is a time lag between the time you post your comment and then the time I can see the comment on the platform, the live streaming platform here. So sometimes I may skip a comment or two, and then if that happens, then we address them in the next session. Thank you very much again. Most probably. Okay, let's say most probably. And I wish you a great Sunday. It's a beautiful day here in Tokyo, and I hope it's the same wherever you are. Enjoy the day, enjoy the night if it is the day before where you are. And we'll see you once again on Sunday, next Sunday, 8:20. Yes, Timothy?
Next Sunday, we will be in Golden Week, so I will be somewhere else. I will be in some far spread off tropical island. I'll probably be wearing a grass skirt, and the natives will be carrying spears.
As long as you're on board and not under, I think things will be fine.
I'll do my
All
best.
right.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Maya.
thank you. See
See
you
you,
next
everybody.
week. Bye.